let us embark on a reflective journey, a journey that strips away the superficial layers of our defensive facades to reveal a raw, tender truth about the ways in which we both flee and return to that elusive ideal of love. Picture, if you will, the dismissive avoidant, a soul that proudly proclaims independence, standing erect behind a fortress of self-reliance and emotional detachment. Yet within that fortress, the rooms remain dimly lit by flickering images of a perfect love, never quite within reach. It is in these private sanctuaries of thought where fantasies about an idealized partner dwell, masked in the guise of self-sufficiency. The very same individual who vehemently shuns closeness is, in fact, tormented by a yearning for an impossible perfection. This is the paradox at the heart of avoidant behavior, a deep-seated desire for connection buried beneath a veneer of self-protective detachment. For years, scholars and therapists have distilled the vast range of human attachment into a handful of core styles: secure, anxious, dismissive avoidant, and fearful avoidant. Yet it is the insecure styles that truly reveal our internal wounds. For the dismissive avoidant, the core wound is the fear of losing independence, a terror so profound that even the whisper of intimacy can send them spiraling back into isolation. Conversely, those with an anxious disposition suffer from the relentless dread of abandonment, a fear that often propels them into frantic pursuits of reassurance. And then there are those with fearful avoidant tendencies who harbor both of these fears, perpetually caught in a limbo between wanting to love and being terrified of the cost it might bring. This brings us to the curious efficacy of the no-contact rule, a strategy that, at first blush, may appear counterintuitive. How is it that by withdrawing, by creating distance, we provoke a reawakening in the avoidant partner? The answer lies in the subtle mechanics of human memory and desire. An avoidant, when left to their own devices, finds themselves suddenly exposed to the vast emptiness of an emotional void, one that is filled with memories of a love they once idealized. With the absence of the constant stimulus of another's presence, their deactivation system relaxes. In that silence, the heart begins to whisper what it had long stifled, a deep, unyielding nostalgia for a connection that once promised so much. Consider the analogy of a starved garden. When one tends to the garden too frequently, over-pruning and over-watering, the vibrant flowers of desire and beauty never have the chance to flourish. Instead, when neglected for a time, nature, in its own mysterious way, begins to reclaim and nurture the hidden seeds beneath. Similarly, the no-contact period functions as an emotional intermission, a pause that allows the avoidant individual to contemplate the absence of the very presence they once took for granted. It is through this reflective solitude that the inner architecture of their attachments begins to shift, paving the way for a rekindling of interest in what was once so carefully suppressed. Yet, it is not solely a matter of isolation. There is a compelling change in perspective that occurs. Many avoidants, when confronted with a complete and indiscriminate absence, are forced to reckon with a stark new reality. The landscape of dating and relationships outside the confines of that once familiar connection becomes startlingly barren, and in this moment of introspection, the allure of what was once lost begins to emerge in sharp relief. They start to remember the subtle yet intimate details of shared moments, the laughter that echoed in quiet corners, the gentle touch that bridged distances, the shared silences that spoke louder than words. I am reminded, with a touch of wry amusement, of the many times I have witnessed individuals caught in the throes of what I like to call the avoidant death wheel. Imagine the cycle. The initial allure of desire gives way to a honeymoon period of tentative closeness, only to devolve into a phase where the shadows of doubt and worry cast long, unforgiving silhouettes over the relationship. As the avoidant begins to sense the impending loss of control, they instinctively retreat, erecting yet another wall to guard the sanctity of their independence. It is in that pivotal moment of withdrawal that the no-contact rule works its silent, transformative magic. The fascinating interplay here is that often the very nature of anxious and avoidant pairings ensures a self-perpetuating cycle of exacerbated insecurities. The anxious partner, in a desperate bid to salvage a crumbling connection, may inadvertently trigger further withdrawal with frantic attempts to fix the unfixable. Their emotional outbursts and constant appeals for reassurance only serve to validate the avoidance instinct to retreat deeper into their shell. Conversely, as the no-contact rule firmly sets in, the avoidance emotional defenses begin to lower, allowing just enough light to seep through the cracks, light that casts a gentle glow on forgotten memories and lingering desires. What is rather ironic is that the implementation of no contact is not necessarily about the overt pursuit of reconciliation. Rather, it is a disciplined act of self-renewal and introspection. It is about stepping back so that one's inner landscape can be recultivated without the distortions of current emotional turmoil. It is in that reflective space that the avoidant, for all their proclamations of independence, begins to perceive the stark contrast between the barren reality of new encounters and the rich, though often idealized, tapestry of their past relationship. In this landscape, one encounters what might be termed the Phantom X, that elusive specter of a past partner whose memory lingers like a cherished old tune. The Phantom X is the benchmark against which all future relationships are measured, often unfairly and unyieldingly. Avoidants, having placed this idealized figure upon an unattainable pedestal, find themselves oscillating between a desire for novelty and a deep-seated longing for the familiar. When the absence of no contact is enforced, that very absence becomes the trigger for a cascade of fond recollections, each steeped in the bittersweet hues of what might have been. The beauty and the heartbreak of this human drama is further highlighted by the observation that, given enough time, even an avoidance outlook can shift, gradually realigning their focus from the negatives to the peaks and endings of shared experiences. It is the peak-end rule in full display, where the mind naturally gravitates toward the most emotionally charged moments, selectively preserving the highlights while dimming the less appealing details. In the absence of constant input, the avoidance memory becomes an artisan, meticulously crafting a narrative that leans heavily on the past's most alluring fragments. As we navigate these intricate dynamics, what emerges is an enduring truth, that our deepest wounds and longings, no matter how fiercely we defend against them, remain the quiet architects of our emotional destiny. In the delicate interplay between distance and desire, between relinquishment and the silent call of nostalgia, lies the secret to why most avoidants ultimately return after a period of no contact. It is not a whimsical or irrational decision, but a measured response, a subtle acknowledgement that sometimes absence truly does sharpen the appetite for what once was. And so, we reach the core of this exploration. The no-contact rule is not simply a punitive measure, but a transformative process. It is an invitation for both parties, especially the avoidant, to step away from the frenetic pace of modern relational dynamics, to pause and to gaze inward at the intricate architecture of their own hearts. For in that stillness, even the most self-assured and detached among us may find that the very qualities we pride ourselves on are also the ones that leave us yearning for what has been lost. Let this be a lesson, then, to all who wander in the labyrinth of love and longing, that sometimes our greatest recourse is to retreat, to let silence and space work their quiet alchemy. In time, even the most resolute avoidant may come to understand that the barren emotional landscape left in their wake is nothing compared to the lush, albeit imperfect, garden of a connection that once promised everything.
If you believe this video might help someone dear to you, share it with them. A small gesture on your part could mean the world to a friend in need.